Well, thank you for sitting down and hearing the voice of the community. I see the fallout, from the video you did was, but
Yeah.
things happen. So I'm always optimistic. The solutions to problems, we all mitigate it and get around it. So that's why we're here talking. You kind of went off now. I don't see you. I kind of see you. Do you see me okay?
Yeah, I can see you perfect.
Okay, it's whoever's talking. Okay, went off.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and start with a couple things, and I'm going to start the conversation by stating I'm not a scientist. I'm not a geneticist, so a lot of the science lingo goes right over my head, right?
Yeah.
I'm a realist. I'm definitely a realist, to the point kind of guy. Get my hands dirty. So let's rock and roll, and bear with me through this whole process.
All right.
Question one is, I'm in the galaxy. I've been a supporter of the galaxy since the galaxy first came out. It was really exciting for breeder cultivator like me, because I've crafted and honed my own special cultivars over a number of years, and through patents and sharing my genetics, I always hoarded them and kept them to myself, because I was in fear of all the time I put into where I've gotten to with my genetics. So
of course,
it's been completely I went to Phylos. When I heard Phylos, I had attorneys saying $10,000 we can patent them, but patent them's just, it's no different than at that point, 2015 or 16. It's just a name. There's no security in a patent. I don't see it. I think there is later on, but now and then there really wasn't. So when Phylos came out and gave me kind of a foundation for me to lie my work in, and also talk about, what cultivators and where my lineage, where it all came from as well too, because everything I got came from somebody else. There's no doubt about that. I just, I manipulate and take and play with the plants and back cross them and pull phenos back out. And you got to love what you do. And I love that part of smoking. So how does Phylos plan on protecting Soil King and other genetic providers in the galaxy now? And is there a possibility of some rights to genetics with Phylos? So when they're passed on, any sort of binding or legal or signature page or anything with cultivars that we have in the Phylos now, how do you take what you got and run with us together as a team? And there's more questions to that too. That we have, but
I think I know what you're getting at. But so look, I think what you're saying is how are your genetics protected now, and how does all of this affect how your genetics are protected? Right.
Correct.
One thing that it's complicated to explain is that when you sequence the DNA of a plant, you're not, that data doesn't give you any rights to that plant. So the galaxy doesn't protect your plant. We don't own the plant. We don't have any rights to it. All the galaxy does, all the test does, is it identifies your plant. It's like a barcode, and we read the barcode and we put it on the galaxy, and the protection you have is that your plant has been identified and it has your name on it. We can show that you had possession of that plant at that time. And so that does not give you intellectual property rights over that plant. Someone else could say that you got it from them.
Correct.
It shows that you owned it at that point. And in theory, if anyone else tried to patent it, you could say, wait a minute, you can't do that. I clearly had possession of it at this time.
Correct.
But that's all it does. It doesn't give you more rights than that. But it is a stake in the ground showing you had possession, and it doesn't give us any rights to it. People say this often. They say, we gave you our genetics. And they used to mean, when they said the word genetics, they used to mean like the plants themselves, right? And we don't have the plants, we don't have rights to the plants. In fact, the galaxy is a piece of proof that the plant belongs to the submitter, not to us. But I think then people, when they say, so we'll say that, and then people say, well, but you still have my genetics, as if we still have something, as if the DNA sequence meant that we had something, some rights to the plant. But we don't. It's just a registry. It just shows that you have that plant. It doesn't give us anything at all, except we have a list of the barcodes of all those plants, and all of that data is public, so that it's undisputable and so that everyone has access to it.
When you say everyone, like what, and everyone has access to it, are we talking about other um, genetic companies, other, I mean, who?
So we made the data in the galaxy public so that anyone can.
Correct. I got you there. Okay.
Yeah, and so that data is public. The USPTO could go and look at it. We have competitors who've downloaded that data and used it to make their own tests. We know that scientists around the world have looked at the whole data set.
Right.
We were very concerned from the beginning that people would be nervous about us having their data. They would think the data is more valuable than it is in different ways. And we made it public because we thought that could help block patenting attempts. But we also assumed that once we made it public, no one would care about us having it anymore because everyone can see that data. It's just public in the public repository called the NCBI. So does that make sense?
It does, and we're going to be redundant on a few of these questions going in there because you answered a lot of pieces to it. One thing I heard you say was, for me as a cultivator or a breeder and other breeders that I know, it is our life. I know people that have spent their entire life just breeding, right? Just pheno hunting, and it's their passion. So we need to clarify how, and we're always so scared someone's going to grab. It takes us years and years and years to come up with something that we really like, and then all of a sudden, that's why we don't like to give it all out in cuttings, or we don't, we're hoarding our seeds. People call us hoarders, but the security aspect, it's hard for us to spend a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades and come up with something that anybody else can grab it and say it's theirs. And the beautiful part of the Phylos is that for a guy like me, who, I say, I don't call myself a breeder. Because it's not my full life work, but I've been, for terms, jacking off and molesting plants and pheno hunting. And it's exciting, that's an exciting part of my life. But I don't call myself a breeder because I haven't put my entire life into that project.
Sure.
It's a solenoid of Soil King or what I've done, and I've honed up some crafty cultivars that I'm really proud of, right? So coming to Phylos, it was a foundation for me to gift something. There it is. It's in the galaxy. I know that now I can give some cuttings or some seeds, and if anybody ever renames it, and it, let's say it blows up into something, it comes back, then I have some leverage, right? I have something.
Right. You can, and people use the galaxy like that sometimes. People, when people think something has been stolen, they've gone and got a sample of that and sent it in and proved that it was the same thing that they put on the galaxy earlier. And we don't get involved in that, but then they have a piece of evidence that what they said happened. I mean, the reason why making genetic data public like that is handy for people who have their life's work in it and they don't want to let it out. Without letting it out, they can put a flag up saying, I own this plant, here's the barcode for it. But
Right.
you can still, you don't have to, you can still hoard the plant, or you can let it out more safely. But you've just registered some information about it. That's all. But Patrick, let me say a couple things before we dive into the rest, because what you just said about how for so many people it's their life's work, and they've made so many different varieties, and they have so many reasons to be scared really about their life's work being taken away.
Correct.
So I just want to address what I think is the core thing here. So in that video, I said some things that seem really scary to people.
Correct. You did. Yep.
So when we started this business, we were working with thousands of people, hundreds of people like you, who 90% of our customers are in California and Oregon. We built the business working with small farmers, and we said to everybody, we believe in how you do things. We believe in sustainable agriculture. We believe that cannabis should be incredibly diverse and that we have to preserve all of this diversity. We told people that we really shared their values, and we told small farmers that they could trust us.
And I heard all that. That's
Yeah,
fine.
and then you saw that video of
Yeah.
me, right?
Correct.
So here's the thing so when that video came out and everyone got so angry, it's immediately obvious why they got so angry, right? Because that seems to contradict the things that we've said about our belief in genetic diversity and our support for small farms. And we stopped and we took stock of everything we were doing. And we really asked ourselves, like, are we losing track of our values? Are we going down a different path that we never meant to go down? And we thought really hard about, we wanted to take a second to look at ourselves and make sure that we weren't going in a direction that we couldn't feel good about. But the truth is, we're not. We totally believe in what we're doing. The reason why that video sounded like that is that for us, there are two different worlds. There's the craft flower market, and now there is this global cannabis industry. It is driven by people, large-scale producers all over the world now, growing huge production lots of cannabis and hemp. Most people think that 80% of the global cannabis market pretty soon will be for oil.
Yep.
And that is a whole different world, and it is already being structured the way other agricultural crops are structured. And we are entering that world. It is a totally separate world from the craft flower market. So the things that I said to that audience, I'm not going to back down from a single thing I said to them. Every single thing I said to them was true. And the reason why it's so scary is that I was talking about a different world than the flower market that you live in. So I said all of the cannabis around today is going to be gone pretty soon. It's going to be replaced by new varieties, and Phylos is going to make those new varieties. On the large-scale industrial market, just as with every other crop, the minute you have a variety that is a little bit higher yielding, that variety will dominate everything. The heirloom varieties around now will not be able to compete on the global large-scale market. The minute we have varieties that are higher yielding and early flowering and they make more oil, they will immediately replace the stuff that's around now. And then those ones in a year or two will be immediately replaced.
Okay.
There will be constant improvement, and the stuff that used to work will be gone. And that's how it will work on that stage. And we struggled for a long time to explain to investors what we were doing, because most cannabis investors don't understand how agriculture works. They think that the cannabis is like a commodity, like oil that you mine from the ground, and it's always the same. They don't realize that plants are constantly evolving. And anyone who works in corn or soy or whatever, they understand that people are always trying to get better yields and stronger plants or whatever. So that's how it works in that world. And it took a while to figure out how to get investors to understand that the cannabis will be changing. And in that world, it will change with waves of total replacement. And so I make a big statement like that. All the cannabis is going to be gone in a couple of years. And it's true. In that world, it's true. What I don't say in that talk is anything about our values, because investors don't want to hear about your nonprofit that you started. And I don't say anything about the craft flower community, because for those guys, that's like one little corner of the market that they're not concerned about. We have been absolutely committed to figuring out how to help small farmers and save all of the genetic diversity that's out there. We wanted the genotype test to be a thing that would help thousands of small breeders protect their IP in a way, register it at least, and continue to create. And we just see those two worlds as totally different. And I realize that the way I talk to investors about the large scale ag industry sounds heartless. And there's something kind of soul killing about talking to investors over and over. Like you gradually, like you leave out all the stuff that's just there because you want it to be like that slide that I had that said, pretty soon all the cannabis will be gone. It used to say, but we also have to preserve all the diversity that existed there before so it doesn't get wiped out. But like you have 7 minutes to give your talk, and eventually that stuff just comes off because you're not talking to an audience that cares about that at all. And when investors get to know us later on, we sit down and we say, just so you know, we're kind of hippies. Like we grew up in Oregon. We have roots in that world. We are committed to small farmers, and you're going to have to live with that. And the investors go, okay, whatever, that's fine. Some of them are actually really into that. Some of them don't care. You have to tell them all the stuff that you do, but you get in a habit of speaking in these two different languages, and that feels shitty to me. I think we need, as a company, to start saying, like, talking in one language and telling everybody what we're doing, and we haven't done a good enough job of that. So when people see us talking about that market to that audience, it sounds terrifying, but we're just not talking about what's going to happen to your world.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, it does make sense. It makes a lot of sense, and sometimes, you put yourself in a position that it hurts your company, and you're explaining it now. Like my community needs to hear that from you. So we're grateful that you're sitting down and talking with me today, first and foremost. I understand big ag. I get where we're going as an industry, and I understand the protection. We are fighting to protect the little bit, 0.25% of this market we have been knocked down to left. We're trying to stay alive as a especially a Northern California community and across the world for genetics, but us up here, and we're struggling. The struggle is real. So when we align with partners like yourself and we in a security manner, that means something to us.
You got to know you can trust us.
I have to know that I can trust you, and we have to know that we can trust you, right? And it was heartbreaking, to say the least, and I've been out there trying to, I'm not one to cast stones. I've been telling everybody I'm not going to cast stones, right, until I sit down and have this interview or talk to you, and we really put we have the communication, because what happens. One guy says one thing and they add on and it goes on, and yeah, you put your foot in your mouth. There's no doubt about it. You just admitted it, right? Back in the layman's theory, that's where I'm at, right? Cut to the root right here. That's what happened. You're cleaning it up. As a lot of things happen. I'm launching seeds with the Phylos label on it. I pulled all my launch. It's affected me in a negative way. It hurt.
And we feel really, really terrible about that. And I wish we'd been faster about dealing with this, but so we're going to release a statement next week clarifying all of this stuff. I mean, all of the things that people are saying that we did, we just did not do those things.
Right.
And the reasons why that video was so scary to people, just it's so clear to me why it was, but they've just connected the dots in a way that's not true. And it is on us, the communication breakdown, and it's on us that we.
A couple of things, and not to do it, but you said it earlier. But when off the top of my head, it was. Pretty much the breeders are going to be replaced in the next few years. And this is something that, you know what I mean? It just doesn't sit right to hear that. That was a shock and awe moment for, the biggest breeders in our industry. It ripped our souls apart. And as much as we wanted to defend Phylos because we feel like we're partnered with Phylos, the rest of the community is attacking anyone that puts their hand up and says, hold on a second, I'm doing my own due diligence. I want to figure this out for myself. Just because I'm saying that, I'm getting attacked. I have plants getting ripped out of greenhouses. I had a lot of stuff. I'm a fair guy. I'm integrity. I roll with who I am in my heart. Like, that's who I am, right? So, and I know where the relationship, when I did the first video with Phylos, I was excited because finally I had an opportunity to share what I crafted with the world. And I was excited. And I still feel like there's a solution to this relationship. And I think there's a future with Soil King and Phylos going. We just I need you sitting here, statements, answering questions. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to hate on Phylos. That'll never quit at this point. Those are things you're going to have to deal with. We just, through time and through integrity and building that trust back up, I think we might have a future together. But let's just go through some of these questions.
All right, let's do it.
Yes, a lot of this stuff is we already just talked about a lot of it, so I'm going to try to breeze through it as best as I can. Does Phylos the snip, right? Does Phylos have a 50K snip panel? Yeah. And maybe explain what the snip panel, the SMP panel, is for viewers out here.
Yeah. All right. So, let me just give you the whole story on this thing, okay? So people felt like not only were we joining forces with Big Ag to wipe out all the breeders, but they felt like we had taken valuable data from them, built trust with them, taken all this data, and then we're using that to wipe them out. And so on one hand, we are not going to wipe out all the flower breeders. We are going to draw a protective wall around them in every way we can. And we actually have a lot of ideas about that. But here's what happened with the data. So we started out as a testing company doing the genotype test. And then we started turning ourselves into a breeding company. And for years, we were a breeding company, kind of, but we were just doing breeding for other people, or we were building a business model around helping other people do breeding. We thought we couldn't touch the plant. We thought we were a data company and it wouldn't work to touch the plant. And so for several years, we had a page on our website that said tools for breeders. And we talked about how we were developing genetic markers, which is just a correlation between a little bit of DNA sequence and a trait in the plant. So, once you look at thousands and thousands of DNA sequences and plants, you see.
Connection went. You guys hear me all?
Hey, sorry, the browser just crashed.
That's back. Right. You're good. You're back. Yeah.
Anyway, so that's a genetic marker. You figure out a little bit of DNA sequence across thousands of plants tends to be present in those plants that have this certain trait. And then that can help you breed faster because you can use the marker to screen plants. So we had this page for several years on our website called Tools for Breeders. And it said, we're developing modern scientific tools to help people do plant breeding. Get in touch with us. We're partnering with people to help them do plant breeding. We're not doing it ourselves. We're developing genetic markers. We told everyone that we were working on building all the data tools to power breeding, but we weren't doing it for ourselves. We were doing it to help other people do breeding. That was the business model for a long time. Can you hear me still okay?
Oh,
But we also told people on that page, we're not using your galaxy data to develop markers. And the reason for that is because it's just complicated. Again, people connect the dots in a certain way, and they just don't have the whole story. So the data that we collect for the galaxy, we look at 2,000 SNPs. A SNP is just a site in the genome. So the genome, the cannabis genome has 800 megabases. What is that? That's like 800 million, I think it's 800 million sites across the genome. And so the genotype test looks at 2,000 of those, 2,000 out of 800 million. So that's not very many. And generally people figure you can't figure out markers when you're looking at so few sites in the genome. We also didn't have any information about those plants. And you have to have all the detailed information about the plants and then look at the DNA sequence together, and you have to have a lot of DNA sequence. That's how you figure out what markers are. So the genotype test, just, there was no way to develop markers from it. But the funny thing is, and so we were never using anyone's data to do that. The funny thing is that people feel like we use their data to build all these tools for breeding that we're now going to compete with them using. The thing that's funny and hard to explain is that we didn't use that data because we couldn't, because it wasn't the right kind of data. We actually were worried about people thinking we would use it, so we made sure we had total rights to use it. We had a data policy that said we did have the right to use it if we wanted to, and we made it all public so that anyone could use it, and we thought that would give us the right to use it too, because anyone could use it. But we still didn't use it because it wasn't the right kind of data. And at the same time, we were telling the world, we want to do that. We want to use data like that to develop genetic markers to help breeding. We told everyone that we wanted to do that, but we just didn't with that data because we couldn't. We actually always hoped that we would develop a new test that would let us do like real marker development. And it just didn't happen. So on the one hand, we're telling people like, we didn't use your data. On the other hand, it's confusing because we wanted to figure out markers and we thought that would be good for everybody. And we didn't feel bad about that. It seemed like a great thing to do. We wanted to start to figure out markers so that every time someone did a genotype test, we could tell them, hey, you have the marker for botrytis resistance. You have the marker for 1-to-1 CBD to THC. We wanted to be able to tell people that with the test. And we thought,
that's great information for a guy like me.
yeah, but that didn't happen, sadly, or it hasn't happened yet. Anyway, so what did happen is that we did use the testing business to collect genomic data. We used the lab to collect genomic data and to get really good at handling it, totally aside from the genotype test. We did a lot of other sequencing. We figured out what samples we should sequence completely. We reached out to a lot of other people and collected other samples separate from the genotype test, and we sequenced entire genomes and built all this other data independent from our customer data set. And then we use that data to build this SNP array. And the SNP array looks at 50,000 sites instead of 2,000. We co-developed it with the company Illumina. And that's the tool that powers real breeding. We didn't use the customer data to develop it because you just can't. But now we have that tool, and pretty soon we're going to roll it out and start and start using it in various ways. And the truth is that after trying to work with other people's plants and collect lots of data and figure out how to do breeding and push the evolution of cannabis forward just as a data company, it didn't work. You just can't do real breeding like that. You need to have your own facility. And so finally we switched and decided we had to do our own breeding. And in our own facilities, we will use the array to drive our breeding program and collect tons and tons of data and figure out markers and do our own plant breeding. And then we will make those markers available however we can to our customers. And I know that it seems like a big switch that we switched from doing plant breeding for other people to doing it for ourselves.
Right.
But we just had to. We tried not to for a long time, but we had to make that switch. And now it's just up to us to show our customers why we're not going to be competing with them, because no business wants to compete with its customers, and we especially don't, because the cannabis community needs help, you know.
Right.
Anyway, so that's what the snip panel is. It's a tool for breeding. We will use it for our own breeding program. We have to figure out now how we're going to use it, if we're going to use it for the genotype test, or we don't want to be collecting data from people that they don't want us to collect. But our assumption is that we will have lots of customers who do want to use it and find markers, and we have to figure out how we're going to do that.
So how if a test that I send in with a cultivar, it has a certain marker that we really love that I don't know is in there yet. How do I trust that if you find that marker, you're going to actually let me know that, that relationship came from my cultivar getting sampled into Phylos?
Right. So a lot of people ask us that, but here's the thing. So two things about that. First of all, we're not going to do marker development from the genotype test.
Okay.
We're going to do it internally. We could open up the array and do genotyping for our customers, and we might run a few thousand plants, right? But internally, we're going to run tens of thousands of plants, and that's where the work is going to get done.
Is that on your own plants in your own tree setup now? So, but those cultivars came from somewhere. So
that's right. Well, we'll get to that. That's a different question. I want to tell you where they came from, but that's it. Let's do this, and then I'll explain where they came from.
Okay.
But here's the other thing. People say, like, if I give you my sample, you're going to find a marker in it, and then you've got some valuable thing from my sample. But it doesn't work like that. You figure out markers by looking at thousands of plants, and any one plant, it doesn't have. You could tell someone if once you know that this piece of DNA is always correlated with botrytis resistance, and you know that you have the marker figured out. If someone submits a sample, you can tell them, hey, you have the marker for botrytis resistance. But if you submitted that sample to me before we looked at thousands and thousands of plants that had that marker, we wouldn't know that your plant had it. So it's not something you learn from one sample. You learn it by looking at thousands and thousands of samples.
Correct.
And if there are any markers that can be found in the genotype data that we've so far collected, it will be unlikely because there's only 2,000 SNPs per sample. But if there are any that can be found, anyone in the world could go look in the data and try to find it. Not just us. Like, that data is public domain. If there are markers there, anyone can find it. But going forward, I don't think people want to do. We'll see, Patrick. We'll see. I don't think we had this idea of that we could do marker development in a collaborative way with the community.
Beautiful.
I don't I don't know that that will work anymore. People are very nervous about sharing data, and they don't want to appear to be giving data that they think is valuable to a company, and we don't want to take any data from anyone that they don't want us to have. So it might just have to be work that we just do individually, and we can still make it available to our customers. Yeah, we'll just have to see. I mean, the only reason why the testing business as a whole is never going to be like, it's not what our investors care about. It's always been a way for us to work with thousands of farmers and to help them. Our investors think we should just leave it behind and just do plant breeding, but we don't want to do that, because we see the testing business as the only way for us to roll out our science to more breeders. And in the flower community, we want there to be lots of breeders. We just want to be one participant among many. So if that's going to happen, we need to make our science available to you guys, and we have to figure out how to do it.
Yep, agreed. How do you do that? That's on you. I don't know. I mean, that's the scientific side.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah. I'm going to breeze through some of these. I'm just going to skip, but like how many, what is this? How many samples? And how many is published in the NCBI? But I guess these are a lot of questions that we kind of went over right now. Here's a question. How many of those samples generated unique SNPs used for reference material in the SNP panel?
So that's what we just talked about.
Yeah, I got
Samples don't generate SNPs.
Got it.
So none of those samples did. That was just all independent sequencing work we did.
So a lot of these questions you just answered. A lot of it.
Yeah.
A lot of it. Kind of who's partners? Where's your partners on all this? I mean, you want to name any of those, or?
Well, right now, given all this, it's a little hard. Life is a little hard for our partners right now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I bet.
Which is too bad. We need to fix that for them.
I guess we answered a lot of this. Does Phylos plan on replacing existing varietals with their own? I mean, you're saying not replace existing, but create new, correct?
Well, don't get me wrong. Like, when you create new varieties, they have a tendency to replace the old ones. So, when we look at what's happened in agriculture to every other crop, people have put a lot of money into plant breeding. They've developed a few elite cultivars, as they're called. And then those elite cultivars have wiped out all the diversity that used to be there, because all the farmers just grow a few of those top varieties. And so that's like a real danger in cannabis. So the answer to that question is the mass market varieties that are out there now.
Yeah.
Those will be replaced.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They'll be replaced by a sadly small number of improved varieties. But in the flower world, which thrives on diversity, there will always be thousands of varieties in that world. And we have to actively fight to save all the heirloom varieties from being wiped out like that. The danger of genetic bottlenecking like that is one that we've been focused on forever. That's why we started the Open Cannabis Project, partly. Like, the tagline of that project was preserving diversity. We always knew that putting a lot of money into plant breeding means that you run this risk of making new varieties that put pressure on the old varieties, and it makes it harder for people to grow the old varieties. So, our mission has always been to find ways to use science that are environmentally and socially responsible. And so we know that plant breeding can carry that danger, and we just have to make sure that that doesn't happen to the flower community.
And that's going to be a big part on you figuring that out. Like,
We are going to have to show that world that we are a good ally to them. Yeah.
That's correct. What else we got? We went over that. Here's a question. Was the testing business set up as a way of crowdsourcing samples, funding to pay sequences, and to produce a genomic data to support breeding programs?
So the answer to that is yes and no. So we started it as a testing business, and then it evolved into a breeding business for other people, and we were absolutely using the testing business to do all the sequencing work and build all the stuff that we had to do for breeding, and everyone was fine with that for years when we weren't doing it with our own plants. But absolutely, we were using the testing business to get good at doing the breeding stuff. We weren't actually using the Galaxy data, but we were using the lab, and we did incubate the breeding business inside the testing business. And we really underestimated how scary it would be to people when we switched to doing breeding for our own plants. We should have figured out how to let people know that we weren't going to be a dangerous competitive force for the flower breeding community. There's a way to explain that, and we didn't do it, and we should have.
Well, I mean, there's still time to prove that and work on that.
Yeah. Do you think that people will understand that there's these two worlds? There's the global industrial market, and then there's the flower market, which is the one we know and love, and they are really different, and we just have different plans inside both of them.
I mean, it is what it is on that. So the industry, you're talking about biomass extracts going down in mass scaling, and I don't see a huge number of different breeds, different cultivars. You're going to hone into the best of the best, and maybe there's a dozen that everybody's going to be sought after. That's just my head, spinning it off. The flower market, in those 12 breeds that you might be developing, or it might end up being 25. Who knows? It might be 100. I don't know.
Those won't be any good for flower. They'll have crappy terpene profiles, probably.
That's what I mean. Those will be different for what I mean. I hate to say this, but I call it the well, I'm not going to say it, but a lot of the lower level, the mass produced.
You can make fun of that stuff. It's all right. Look, here's the thing.
Race to the bottom whole, but it's such a need, because the science is a need for, where we're at. Like we are lacking so much science to where we're at today. But as a crafted farmer in representing, the flower market, we're a small percentage. We like those variables of different flavors and uniqueness and the creativeness that we come up with, the one-offs. It's great. So I don't really ever see in that going away. But when you said how you gonna tell that story and bring that together and still create the trust, I don't have an answer for you on that. Like you're in a shithole right now, right? You're in a situation. So I think through building up trust and earning back integrity, I'm not saying you don't have any, but I'm saying, you got to earn that back, and walking away from it is the worst thing you'd want to do. You need to be present, answer questions, and show up. I'm talking to you. I have respect for you. I'm not denying this. I'm looking for solutions. I'm here trying to help you. At the same time, I'm looking out after my family, our community that is in a lot of agony. We've been beat to death, and here we are. And a big part of this is we're in a lot of fear right now. So it's going to take some time to get over this, but it's going to take you being present, communication, building back up that little bit of trust, the barrier that was broken. And it's going to be some work. I'm not going to lie to you.
Oh, we're not lazy. Do the work. The thing that sucks about the two different markets is that and I think this is part of why we've done we haven't done a good enough job communicating, right? Is that we started in the flower world, and I think we haven't been, when we're talking to people in that world, we haven't been we haven't been proud enough of what we're doing in the rest of the market. You know, we are building a lot of complicated science, and it's expensive, and you have to raise money to do it, and
Yeah.
and there was no way for us to carry out this mission of bringing advanced science to cannabis without raising money and then figuring out how we're going to make money. And that means we have to enter the global oil market. And you know what that means? That means that we're going to be breeding shitty weed with bad terpene profiles, and it's embarrassing. And I freely admit that. And so I think we haven't had the strength of our convictions enough to tell our farmer friends, like, we are going to go make lousy mass market weed for oil production, and we believe that we're doing the right thing, and we do. That's the right thing for us to do. That's the cannabis we have to focus on. That's the only way we can do this.
All I can say to that is welcome. I said, what I can say to that is welcome to the cannabis industry, as we all are experiencing this silo of needing money and needing leverage and needing to build a foundation and not having financing to do it. And we all as a community are trying to put the pieces together somehow to save ourselves. And that's, you know, at times we question our own integrity of the decisions we're making, but the decisions are survival. It's survival time. Like, you know, me personally, I'm constant, you know, I have my licenses are distribution, manufacturing, nursery, transportation, delivery is coming. I have an event license. But there's so much to this, and I still own so much of this, but it's a scary time. It's like finances are everything. Like we are non-corporate in a corporate entity now, trying to keep whatever little bit of you know, generational family values intact without being overcome, deployed, and destroyed by the corporate. But the reality is we need that. You know, you have to leverage yourself, and you have to survive in this industry, and it's going to take money to do it. And we're all chameleon changing. You know, it's a hard time for a lot of us.
Yeah, I mean, look, don't get me wrong. Like, when we think of the craft cannabis community, you know, at least for me, like, I'm not saying like all those people have to like come into the corporate world. They have to get licenses, and they have to figure out how to do financing and all of that. Like, there are thousands and thousands of breeders out there who are not going to get licenses.
Correct.
And they're the people who started this whole thing, and we owe all of this to them. Amen. And they're going to find however they can to do breeding, or they're going to have their home grow plants or whatever. And the plants that they have and that they're still working with and protecting, they need to be preserved. Like, people have built a way of life around doing all of this work, and I do not want to be part of the forces that wipe that out. We just really don't want to see that happen. And, you know, here's the thing, like, we're going to be doing all this mass market cannabis breeding, but we still want to be involved in the craft cannabis world, and we do want to develop plants for that world, but we're not going to be constantly releasing new varieties at the speed that market rolls with. We will release occasional varieties, and when we do, we will let people take them and keep breeding with them, because we want to be a participant in that world. But that world works because there's so many people being so creative, and we know that.
That's an interesting concept. I didn't think of that, but you can actually stabilize a genetic to where we need to. Yeah, that's pretty. And then give it back, and we could take that
we can
use
that's
it as.
great.
Yeah, that's pretty. That's pretty neat right there, because we're constantly searching for those. Um, those plants that the structure is great, mold resistant. There's so many things we are looking for the heart of a plant. When I'm popping a bunch of seeds, there's a lot of traits that I am looking for that's not flower oriented. It's not related to that. It's how it's going to do outside, how it's going to finish the structure of the plant. There's just so many varieties of things we look for. So if you hone some of those, and that's something that we could grab and then do some more breeding projects. I didn't think of that. Pretty neat, though.
I mean, look, we're not just saying don't worry, we're not gonna hurt the cannabis or the craft cannabis community. Don't worry about us. We're gonna go away and breed lousy weed. We need to actively help small farmers and breeders survive. And honestly, I don't know if we have a plan, but we think about it all the time. So we actually think there's an opportunity as the flower market gets squeezed down. So the mass market will go to oil, and the flower market will become a smaller and smaller part. Most projections say it'll be 20% of the market, and then the craft flower market will be a small part of that.
2%.
The only way that community can survive, we think, is if we can recreate like a luxury price differential, so that high-end flower becomes this more rare product, and it goes back to $3,000-$4,000 a pound. And so there's actually an opportunity as the rest of the market shifts to this mass market stuff. And that is the one path. We have to make craft flower into a luxury product. And if we can develop traits and feed those varieties back to all the breeders working on that stuff and be part of what turns it back into a luxury product, which is really in a way what it was before. It was like a black market luxury product, but it could be a legal market luxury product. It's just going to take work, and maybe working with the Appalachian projects, and that's the path. That's the only path.
You're exactly right. Like, that's where in the last year we've been more than the last year, but since the regulated market really came, is we're telling the story of why sun-grown product is so good. Why our small batch varietals are so great. We are telling a story. We believe that our cultivars that we're growing up here and putting our heart and soul in is worth so much more. So we are the 2% of the market. We're the 2% of the market, right? And you're right. Eventually we have sun-grown indoor, but this is going to level off. The indoor and everything's going to be grown for mass biomass extract, all the oils, everything's going to go into that, and then there's going to be terpenes. Everything's going to balance out with these terpene added flavors, and we're going to hone and craft what we've been doing for years on the 2% of the market. And you're right, and that by telling the story, I mean, look at the farm to table movement, right? That came
exactly like that.
Seed to soul, farm to table movement is where it's at. So we see this as an opportunity. For me, as a pessimistic, I am that opportunity guy, and I see the future. And I love telling the story of my cultivators. I mean, I love that part of it. And we have an opportunity. It's just going to take a lot of work, and it's going to take a lot of us coming together. It's going to take guys like you standing up for us as well too. And we have to believe that you're on our side. I believe you're on our side. I just need you now to prove it to the rest of our community, right?
Yeah.
I have to feel it. And by, step one right here, we're talking, and this is really good. And I thank you for this. You said a few other things. Heirloom. So you just told me Heirloom was important to you. To me, that's everything to me. I'm a non-GMO guy. Is Phylos now genetically altered? Is it considered a GMO plant? Those are questions. So
we're not gonna make GMO weed.
Okay.
We will not do that.
Okay. So that we're hearing you loud and clear. I know, because that's a good question. Well, that's a question for me, but I'm sure that's a lot of other people as well, where it's going to.
Patrick, let me just say this also. Like, we are getting into the world of big ag science, and it was scary to us too. Like, we're hiring people from that world. We are hiring scientists who worked at those companies. We have advisors that worked at those companies, and the thing is, we're going to be the last ag science company that you see come into this space that does not have innate trust for that world. Like, we're Oregonians. We grew up with by internalizing a critique of big ag that is so deep. Like, we know that large scale chemical agriculture is not the future of this planet. We know that it's causing incredible destruction, not just for the environment, but for small farmers. And like, we believe, the people in Phylos believe in sustainable, regenerative agriculture, and we have a really clear understanding of how those companies spread pesticides all over the planet and avoided regulation. Like, we understand all that, and yet, like, it's our mission to go into that world and steal the fire from it and bring it to this plant, and we're gonna just do it responsibly. I think right now in the cannabis world, like, people think we're the scariest and most corporate thing in the cannabis world, but from the point of view of the ag world, we're like the biggest hippies in that world.
I mean, I knew you guys when you first started. I know your team. I've seen you develop. I believed in the philosophy behind what you were doing, and this, like, I'll go back to the security point. For me, it was I feel like I had something that I could trust and move forward on. It was, I was so in fear of letting out. So I guess in kind of closing, what I would ask Mowgli is keep the communication going. We need to hear you. Even though you're getting beat up, man, be the voice of reason for us. Like, bring us back. Like, build back this relationship, please.
We'll
do it.
I'm sorry it took us so long. We really did need to do some soul searching and ask ourselves, like, are we 100% ready to stand up for what we're doing and say we're committed to it? We think we're doing the right thing, or like, are we being told by the world that we're not doing the right thing? And it took us a while. And at the end, we were like, you know what? We really do believe in what we're doing. We just have to go and tell people. So we will start to do that now.
Yeah.
Well,
You're going to get a lot of hard questions. You're going to get a lot of meaningless questions, but a lot of the people that are even asking the questions, it's out of fear. And we don't want to.
And they have every right to have that fear.
Yeah. Well, awesome. I don't have any more questions for you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate you talking to me.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for being so level-headed and so committed to, like, hearing all sides of the story. I know there are a lot of other people like that, and we just gotta find them.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm still playing both sides. I'm watching you right now. Like, I gotta watch you. I'm waiting. I'm watching and waiting. So let's see what comes about this. And can't thank you enough for talking to me today, pulling out the time.
Thanks for doing this.
Thank you too.
All right, man.
All right, bud.
We'll be in touch.
Yep.
Thank you.